And get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Allie Singer. I'm a Senior Assistant Director in the Office of Admission at Denison University. And we thank you all for joining us for the Performing Arts webinar. We have some wonderful chairs with us this evening. So if you have any questions, we are more than happy to field them throughout the evening. At the bottom of your screen, you'll find a Q&A section. Please put all of your questions down there. So we are going to speak for about 40 or 45 minutes, generally about Denison, and then we will answer your questions. We want to be very diligent about that, but if we do not answer your question this evening, we will follow up with you in email the next day or so. So please be patient with us as we run through all of the questions today, but we truly appreciate your time. We know there's a lot going on in the world right now in terms of everything. So we appreciate your time and your interest in Denison University, but I would like our faculty members to introduce themselves. Gil, I will start with you if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do on campus and your background.
Sure. My name is Gil Wright Miller. I happen to be a Denison alum, graduated several decades ago. I was going to tell you the year, but never mind about that. I chair the dance department at Denison. My PhD is from New York University in Women's and Gender Studies and Dance. At the time, there wasn't a PhD in dance. Now that is a possibility, but at the time I did it, that wasn't a possibility. And the work that I do intensively myself, my own scholarship work is in somatics, the field of somatics. So it has to do with knowing from the inside out. The field of somatics moves in several branches. One is in therapy, one is in health, one is in the creative arts, and I'm in the creative arts aspect of that field. And I've been at Denison now for 40 years, teaching at Denison for 40 years, and I have loved every single second of it and feel really grateful for the possibility of doing that. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Gil. Mark, if you would like to go next.
Sure. Hi, my name is Mark Evans Bryan. Like my friend Gil, I'm a Denison alum. I've taught at Denison for 19 years. I am the chair of the Department of Theater. I'm excited to be able to talk with you about what we do here. I'm excited to be able to talk about Denison anytime. I'm delighted to talk about Denison anytime. I myself teach history and theory of the theater, and I teach playwriting and solo performance. I direct plays sometimes. My own scholarly work is divided between the books and paper stuff. I'm a historian of the 18th and 19th centuries in the sort of transatlantic theatrical world, primarily the United States, but a little bit around the Caribbean and Europe as well. And I'm a playwright, and I mostly create solo performances. So I have a handful of students who've been reminding me a lot this semester that I need to teach that class next semester. So I think maybe I will. That's what I generally do when I'm not chairing the Department of Theater.
Thank you very much, Mark. And last but certainly not least, Chin Chu, if you want to go ahead.
Hi there. Unlike Gil and Mark, I actually didn't graduate from Denison, but I do love teaching here. I started about 21 years ago, so it's been a great place to teach and a great place to work with students. I'm primarily a composer, so I write music. I write music for the concert hall stage. I write chamber music pieces. I write orchestral pieces. I write pieces for film soundtracks, things like that. And that's what I mainly teach. I'm also a pianist and a bassist, but I teach kids how to write music. So the students I encounter are writing music across genres, whether it's dance music, techno, whether it's soundtracks, whether it's electronic, whether it's singer-songwriter, that kind of stuff. But I chair the department as well, and we have a really big department, and we'll sort of get into all of that. But it's been great to be here at Denison. I'm really excited to answer your questions.
Thank you all so much. So we'll get started with, I think, a question that is on many people's minds as they're looking at colleges and considering really the arts is, what does that look like in the COVID era? How are students coping, and what are all of you doing in terms of events and classroom spaces in the performing arts? And whoever wants to go first can start.
Well, I mean, I can say, obviously, it's hugely challenging. Someone asked me about what this era augured for the future of the kind of live performance that I make. And I said, well, you know, the theater has this really long history of sitting out plagues and you know, Shakespeare very famously had these years off because of illness in London. And I'm not, I don't want to sit out, right? We don't want to sit out. We're not sitting out. But it's really, really challenging. It's really challenging to do safely and to do well and to do richly. And I think everybody here is trying to do that. In our case in theater, we typically in the fall semester would produce 2 plays. So we're producing 2 plays. And in September, we debuted a new work that was based on the poetry of a student who graduated last year. That was a sort of abstract physical piece that was created and rehearsed entirely outdoors, performed outdoors. It was performed in 3 showings a night for audiences of 12. Everyone was masked and very distanced. It was unbelievably heartening. It was a large group of students who made something really beautiful together in the context of a really difficult circumstance. And we have another very large group of students right now who are creating a sort of multidisciplinary, entirely virtual piece that will debut online shortly before Thanksgiving. And those are really 2 poles of how theater has been tackling this unique and difficult time. We're excited about the work that our students have done, excited about how serious they continue to take their art, but how seriously they take taking care of each other. And every time I say anything like that, I knock on wood. It's been an extraordinarily heartening experience. So we're doing our best, we're trying, and we're not sitting out. We're creating the work.
Just because dance and theater have so many constraints in common, I'd love to just ride on that and say we're not sitting out in dance either. So at the top of my list is we've created a series called Moving Resiliency, and every performance that we do, tiny and huge and everything in between, has a little logo on it. So instead of a single performance at the end of the semester where there are 5 pieces, let's say, instead of that, we're continuing to perform all across the year, and we've strung those together with a certain title and a certain logo. The performances themselves have ranged from outside. In fact, right this minute tonight, we're in the midst of a run called Branches, and these are dances that occur outside using nature at the biological reserve. In a way, you might think that it's a series of solos in that they're 6 feet apart all of the time. On the other hand, it's definitely a coordinated ensemble of pieces that happen simultaneously. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we're also creating pieces that have been videotaped and then working those tapes together into a performance piece that can be retained dance on camera, as opposed to just the dance on, just the dance for camera where it's just a record shot. This is dance that wouldn't occur if it weren't for the fact that the camera is also a player, it's also an artistic player. And then the third branch is that we've done some very formal work in the Martin Theater that has been videotaped, but with full dance floor, lighting, wings, costuming, the entire thing that one might expect. And that also has been recorded beautifully in order to be a filmed piece that can be then published out to an audience at the appropriate time. So yeah, we're not sitting out either. In fact, in a way, it feels like we're just as busy as ever, and we just have different delimitations that are taking our creativity in a certain direction for right now. And next semester, maybe a slightly different direction, and a semester after that, a different direction as well. And so that feels like it's part of the creative process, actually. So it feels fine.
I think for music, as you can imagine, a lot of the initial sort of COVID news came out of sort of choirs and choir members infecting one another, even though they were washing their hands and things like that before we sort of really understood the COVID-19. And so I think the first thing I would say to you and to your parents is that, like, what I'm really proud of at Denison is just how seriously we have taken sort of the safety precautions. Every aspect of a student's life is sort of and the faculty and the staff's lives, the community is being taken care of in terms of, what's the best practice for that. So that goes in line with music as well. As you probably know, if you're performing in high school now, that there's probably a lot more restrictions that you guys have. We've been following those very, very strict guidelines that are sort of put out by various studies that have happened over these past 6 months in terms of best protocols and best practices, but also from the sort of the national organizations for the various ensembles and groups too. So we're making music. Just like dance and theater, we are on and we're going on. But I will say we're being very, very careful. Everybody is masked, so that even winds and brass players in the practice rooms, where we have special masks that they are wearing, and they have covers over their bells. We have very strict cleaning protocols so that you're cleaning before and after you use a space. Every space that we have is also scheduled so that it gives an extra 30-minute buffer time before someone else can even sign up for the space. So that this way we can ensure that as you are a student, that like all of those precautions are taken care of. But then we're doing other things like the choir, our chamber singers, which is a group of about 24. They are singing in our 900-seat cathedral, but they're only doing it for 30 minutes, and they're doing it 12 to 20 feet apart, and they are in masks. There are special vocal masks that we have that are bigger and sort of allows people to breathe without, sucking the mask into your own mouth. So they have those masks as well. String players are wearing masks. Pianists are wearing masks. Everything is being cleaned. And so what's been exciting is how we're trying to come up with ways to perform. We are shortening some of the performances, but we're doing multiple performances. This is a little bit different for our practice as opposed to, let's say, theater or dance that are used to doing multiple performances. If you're in orchestra or wind ensemble, often or choir, you're doing one performance unless you're sort of on a tour. But we've shortened programming so that we can perform for a certain amount of students or audience members, let the hall sort of breathe and clean itself, and then we do it again. And so just to let you know some of the things that we've been doing, the jazz ensemble performed outside the steps of Eisner. I'm sitting with this backdrop of this brand new building that the three of us and our departments are sharing right now. We didn't even get a full year in it before COVID hit. So we're still in the sort of the new car smell of the building right now, which is great. So you will be part of that as well. The orchestra is doing some recording, and they will be performing in a couple weeks, and we will hope to either live stream that or have that recording available. The choir is planning on singing in the parking garage because that's mainly open. So we're trying to see how we can make it so that they can safely perform there. The wind ensemble is putting together an album. So they are building different parts and they're doing recording, but everybody's sort of spaced apart. Everybody's recorded, playing differently, and we're working on things like that. Bluegrass ensembles performing, gospel choirs putting something together. Singers Theater Workshop is putting on the 25th anniversary Putnam County Spelling Bee out in the athletic field, in the football field. So everything, we're being creative, but we're letting the arts thrive still in this way because we missed each other too much from March until now. Like, we have to get together, we have to make music. And if you are a performer, then you know what that means. Like, we need to be together to do this, so we got to find a way to do it safely.
Thank you all so much for sharing this information. I just learned a lot of information as well, in terms of what protocols we're doing on campus right now. But speaking of kind of the participation of our students and what that looks like, what are some of the ways that our students, both majors and non-majors, participate in the arts, specifically the performing arts, outside of the classroom? And how do you engage with the town in a typical year, the town of Granville as well as Columbus? Gil, if you want to start.
Sure. Well, I think it might be important to back up just a little bit and tell you what our department holds as near and dear and central to our mission, since we have a small department and we're at, relatively speaking, a small liberal arts college, relatively speaking, right? So the dance department is generative in its nature, right? So we're into training people to being artists and creating work, as opposed to strictly technical training in order to feed major companies later on. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody who's listening, but the point is that one can simply train to be really good as a technician and hope to audition for and get into a large company, and or one could train to generate one's own artwork, right? And we tend toward the second. The second strain for us is that we have a very tight connection between the arts and culture. So we're particularly interested in works that contextualize what we're doing and how we're doing it and where we're doing it. Many of our majors are double majors, dance and something else, right? So that tends to be our avenue, to answer Allie's question, that tends to be our avenue outside of being in the classroom and being outside of the campus itself, right? So for instance, we often do hip hop workshops and various kinds of work like that in the community. We work with children a fair amount. We work between Granville and Columbus in as invited guests, where we work with an organization in New York called Yes, which is an after school type program. So our reach has to do with our interest in agency, developing agency, and in understanding a cultural context in which these dance forms are occurring, and how can we facilitate that and allow people to participate in the arts who possibly don't have the same kind of access to it that we do here at Denison, right?
Whoever wants to go next.
Chingshu, I don't mean to just step ahead of you, but one of the things that I love that my colleagues in theater share a hallway with my colleagues in dance for a variety of reasons, but one of them is because we share a lot of philosophical territory. You know, it's we in the Department of Theater, our whole major, and in fact, the new version of our major was passed just 3 weeks ago. So we're so excited about some of the changes we've been making for years that are now concretized in a sort of systematic way for the work our students will do. Whether they're majors, because we just changed that, or whether they're students from all other sort of walks of Denison, the way we structure our program is the container for the rest of the work and the sort of philosophical sort of grounding of the rest. We believe in theater making at the core of what we do. So while we provide, I think, a really rich set of experiences for the traditional subdisciplines of theater making, if you're an actor or a playwright, designer, that sort of thing. But we start at this level of what does it mean to be a generative creative theater artist? What does it mean to collaborate with other theater artists? What does it mean to lead and to solve problems in the context of that ensemble? And I would say too, this is one of the, I think I echo Gil in a lot of ways. One of the things that I think makes for that work that students do outside our classrooms and outside our laboratories, and also a great deal of the work that they do beyond the campus, is that we focus on theater making in a variety of ways. Some of them are traditional. We have a very robust playwriting curriculum inside the department, as well as a program that brings a relatively well-known, sometimes very well-known playwright to campus every other year to spend a semester with us. We have a close relationship with the people in creative writing and in cinema, and we support a large number of student theater organizations that generally make new work. So in addition to having one or two student theater groups, and there are many more than one or two, what's remarkable about Denison is that they typically are not paying for the rights to do pre-existing plays. It's just all new all the time. So our students, in the improvisational theater group, in the sketch comedy group, in the several different producers of more straightforward theater, are generally making their own work, and they carry it into the world to some great degree. We have a wonderful set of connections with a series of theater companies in Columbus. Our students do internships, but our students also will, make their professional debuts in one way or another with Columbus companies. And more locally, we've begun a program in recent years. It's probably not surprising that a significant number of our students have an interest in education in one way or another. Comparatively few double majors in educational studies, but a lot of our students will think about that as in a sort of career-directed way, and so we've started a program that really meets that interest in bringing student artists into school districts. It's a partnership with a children's museum and some other organizations in this county. but that too is rooted in those students sort of creating their own work. I think it's one of the things that's most distinctive about our department, because unlike my colleagues in dance, theater departments are usually not focused on the generative. It's often about interpretation, very, very often about interpretive artists as opposed to creative ones. So I think that's sort of where our students' lives outside the labs and classrooms often lie as well.
So for music, there are many, many different ways to participate, whether you're a major or a minor or just, have the love of singing or something and you want to participate. We have various ensembles that you can join or audition for. We have, I think, about 28 ensembles. So that's a lot for a school this size. So if you start, as you're doing your school shopping right now, start looking at the different ensembles that the other schools have. One of the differences that we have here at Denison is that our main ensembles are sort of student filled, meaning that it's a little bit uncommon for a school a size of Denison to sort of have its own orchestra, have its own wind ensemble. It's more common that the orchestra is part of a community orchestra, or the wind ensemble is part of the community wind ensemble, so that students can come and participate. But they end up sort of during the 4 years sort of sit in the back of the sections because you have longtime community members that are leading these wonderful ensembles. But at Denison, we sort of, it used to be that way as well with Denison, but about 20 some years ago, about 22 years ago, we made a real conscious break to sort of establish sort of Denison Orchestra and Denison Wind Ensemble, for example, to let students come in and also then be leaders of the group. So you have this opportunity in terms of how you work with one another, how you work in an ensemble, how you lead an ensemble, how you lead a section, to get those experiences while you participate. At the same time, we do tours. We do domestic and international tours. Not right at the moment, even though I got a flyer, I think today, from one of the student tour companies saying, hey, it's really safe to fly, which may be true, but I'm like, where will I want to take anybody right now? But as soon as it's safe, I know that we'll be sort of continuing that as well. But we do have we have one group, the concert choir, that sort of was set up as a community-based and student-based choir. And of course, with COVID right now, we're not sort of having that community component. But other ways that we sort of do outreach to sort of Granville or connect with Granville and Columbus and things like that are some of the things we do with, like, for example, some of the nursing homes and assisted living places that are nearby. We have some great facilities nearby, and they are wonderful sort of art patrons. They come and see all the various productions, all the other departments put on, as well as music, and they also enjoy the programming. So we have a lot of guest artists, and we bring students out to these residencies and do things like that. We have an ensemble in residence. We have two, actually: Ethel, which is a string quartet, and Third Coast Percussion, which is a percussion group from Chicago. And they come in, they work with students. But we also do things that sort of then we include, middle school students to come on in and work with us as well. And when you come to Denison and you spend that first December weekend on campus, you'll notice there's a thing called Granville Candlelight Tour, where the town of Granville, if any of your parents like Hallmark movies and you want sort of a quaint, picturesque town of Granville, that's what Granville looks like anyway. But like when it's sort of December and like it's going to be that Granville Candlelight Tour, there's so many different groups that are performing in town, and it sort of is a great spotlight on how the town and the gown relationship works really well. Columbus being really close by, we're also finding more performing opportunities for students and workshops and masterclass with artists in Columbus as well. And a lot of our great faculty members are also professional artists who are playing in the professional orchestras and groups in Columbus, and they're teaching at Denison.
Very good. Thank you very much. I know one of the questions that I receive a lot from families who visit or people I speak with at high school visits this fall want to know, and I know a few of you touched on it, is it possible for students to double major in the performing arts and something else? And then can you give us an idea of what those students might be studying in addition to dance, theater, or music?
Sure. Well, I'll take a quick stab at it, and I'll let Gil and Mark sort of fill in anything that I'm leaving out, because I'm sure I'm leaving a lot out. But first answer is yes. The liberal arts package that we have is designed that way, so that if you want to think about your courses, a third of your courses are going to be part of that liberal arts package of general education requirements. A third of them are sort of your major area that you're focusing on. That leaves another third that are electives. So many of our students are double majoring, and they're double majoring in all across the field. We will have pre-med students who are music majors. We'll have writers who are as well. And I'm sure my colleagues will talk about the others, but all across, almost any combination that you can think of, people are doing. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that now people are really realizing that the skills that you learn from a really strong liberal arts education will carry you throughout to whatever career that you're going to do. So like if someone's really interested in environmental science, they will find ways and connections of how they have been investigating the materials in both disciplines and create a path of their own and bring those skills onto the next either graduate school path or career path. And I see my colleagues sort of nodding their heads, so I'm just gonna let them go ahead and pick up the ball here.
Well, I would just say that first I want to confirm everything that Ching-Chu just said. And big, giant yes. Yeah, of course it's possible to double major. The same math goes as well. And maybe if you're brand new to college, you might be interested in knowing that in our general education requirements, some of those courses would also fill the requirements in your two majors. So there's a little bit of overlap. So it's not exactly a third, a third, a third. There's a little bit of overlap available there too. So that makes it even more possible. But I would say in dance, probably our two most popular double majors are psychology and anthropology / sociology. And because I mentioned earlier that we have a very kind of extensive commitment to the cultural connections between the arts and cultures, that makes a lot of sense that on an individual level, somebody might be double majoring in psychology and the career path would take them into dance therapy and all kinds of brands and ways, or into somatics as an honest to goodness field all by itself, or in anthropology and sociology, which might take you in another direction having to do with writing or creating dances that are appropriate in various kinds of outlets like the organizations that I was mentioning earlier. I would say though, we have another competition, which is Black Studies, Women's Studies, our various kind of international studies, our various kinds of interdisciplinary departments that are programs that we have here. That's another popular area for double majoring because those majors in particular really thrive on the crossover nature that a double major is really prone to do. So I think for post-Denison, besides making dances, which a lot of our dancers do, which is kind of amazing to me over and over again, year after year after year, it amazes me that the students who graduate from dance actually become dancers, like they make dances. That's mostly what they do. That's the top field. But second to that, I would say probably something related to dance therapy is also a second tier career choice for students who graduate. Going to graduate school is also, of course, an option. And if you go to graduate school, what you do is tend to deepen the thing that you're most interested in. So it could be dance straightforward, or it could be dance along with something else. That's where the therapy comes in. I will say, though, that dance graduate schools now more and more are asking students to be out of school for a few years before they get accepted into dance graduate schools. That wasn't the case 30 years ago. It was looking like it might become the case 20 years ago. It's clearly the case now. So it's not impossible, but it's not a very good idea to go to graduate school right out of undergraduate school now. They want you to be out and work in the field. They want you to dance for a while before you come back to graduate school, so you have some idea what it is you'd like to be generating. So.
I don't know what I can add to those lovely answers. I'll say that it couldn't be more true. You all are in a generation where the double major is a remarkably common thing. Denison is an institution where the double major is a remarkably common thing. Yeah, I think, oftentimes I think people look at theater and they assume the double majors are all English majors, and that's happens from time to time. But I'm trying to think of the ones I have now, and it's chemistry, psychology, Black studies, economics, cinema. And I think that's typical of Denison students. That Denison students are frequently multi-talented, are frequently like curious about the world. And by the way, I don't think that's the only way to have it. When I have advisees, I'm like, listen, you only need one major. You just do one major. We ask you to have one major, and then just take classes and find those things that you're passionate about. The fact of the matter is, what you need to be doing is following that curiosity, establishing ways that you can communicate through what you write and what you research and how you talk. I think that we do that in theater and dance and music. I think that we do that in chemistry and classics and all the other things that we teach so well here. And our students very frequently engage in those things. And then I love it. And I mostly teach history and theory. I love when my students do those. I have a former student who was a double major in mathematics and theater, and I always use her as an example. She wrote this paper for me that was a statistical analysis of the instances of the use of 8 words, all having to do with light or darkness, and then the instances of the usage of those words in plays we know debuted in theaters that were outdoors, and then theaters we know were indoors during a period of transition in Elizabethan London. It was killer. It was so good. It was a math major's project. It was a math major's project, and it's one of my favorite things I ever read. And she today is a very successful person, and I wasn't going to use this example because I can't think what she does, but it's neither theater nor math. Because that's a lot of what the soul of what we do is about. I love to talk about our alums who are professional actors and professional executives in the arts and professional writers. But I really love to talk about our alums who've gone to do these other things, but then talk eloquently. My former student Julie is the chaplain at Emerson College. My former student Evan directs fan experience at Wrigley Field. I have a handful of lawyers who all tell the same story. A handful of social workers who all tell the same story. They'll all talk about what a liberal arts education in the theater meant to the work that they do in the world. And so you do not have to come to Denison and double major. Our art students do in really large numbers, and they do so really, really well. But also, I think that what we do is a remarkable way to conduct a liberal education just by itself.
Very good. Oh my goodness, that research project sounds amazing, and I would love to read it if you want to send it to me. And I know Mark and Gil talked a little bit about what the professional experience is post graduation, but are there any specific internships, maybe music, theater, or dance that students are really drawn to in terms of what they're doing during their time on campus post graduation? Anything like that through the Knowlton Center, through connections, anything like that, Chinchu?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Denison has in general are these summer scholars. So that's one thing that across campus, regardless of the major, regardless of your interest, you can sort of design a project that you want to do and go really in depth with it all summer, and you get a stipend for that. So you don't actually have to take a summer job. You can use the time to stay on campus and research that area. And that could be anything from throat singing to writing a soundtrack for a movie to creating an album or whatever it is that you want to do. And so we have students doing that. And then, but there's also other internships that Denison also offers. Middleton, one of the assisted living places, has sort of an arts internship for sort of an arts director that anyone can apply for to sort of do programming. And what's really interesting is because of things like the Veil series that Denison has, which is a great art series that we're very lucky to have. We bring in amazing artists that come onto campus, and time and time again, I'll run into alums who said, "Oh my gosh, I just saw Yo-Yo Ma in New York, and it was X amount to get a ticket. I can't believe I could just walk down from my dorm and see him perform on stage," and that kind of thing. Well, that Veil series also has a series of interns as well, so that even on campus you can sort of learn how to work sort of behind the scenes on sort of arts management. And then we do have a number of students who sort of then go on to arts management. We have students who go on to music therapy. We have students who go on to education or to graduate school and to professional careers and to other things as well. Sort of like what Mark said. I have some of my favorite advisees are physicians who then, in med school, they still played in their doctor's orchestras and they're still playing. And they talk about how much it meant to sort of have that arts experience at Denison and how that changed them for the careers that they're in. So there's a lot of internship opportunities, and the Knowlton Center is also really revving up to sort of do other very specific programming for our disciplines as well. So there's a lot of things that you can do, definitely.
I'd love to just ride that for a second. I think internships in dance tend to be go make coffee and photocopies, and in exchange you can take class for free. That's what it is in the world. That's what an internship is in the world. And that doesn't feel very helpful or appropriate to me. I mean, I don't mean that you might not have to do that if you're trying to earn a living, like have an alternate job, waiting tables or something. That's a possibility. But internships, it feels to me, should be something different from that. And the one thing that Denison has been so successful at doing through the Veil series, through the Veil departmental offerings, through our ability to bring these world-renowned people to campus is introduce students to those people, literally one-on-one. And then those students can say, listen, I'm interested in going to Sri Lanka and working with you, or I'm interested in coming to New York and working with your company, or vice versa. The artists contact us and say, I've got a position open. I need somebody. I loved working at Denison with your students. I'm wondering if you know of anyone that would be a perfect fit for me. So while it seems it's very much about networking, I think that it's really, at least in the field of dance, it's been much to the advantage of our students that we're able to bring these people to campus and send our students back out into the world, knowing that someone will kind of look after them a little bit in that internship kind of way. And that's been a much more valuable experience. So someone who graduated last year in dance went right from Denison to Sri Lanka for 6 months and had a job teaching at an arts place and creating work on a company under the guidance of the person who was the artistic director of that company. And that was, so much more valuable than making copies and getting coffee. So.
Yeah, and I can just say, I mean, in theater, the most common way my students who are particularly engaged with theater making itself, the most common route for them are apprenticeships, which are some combination of pouring coffee and then usually doing the work. And we've been fortunate, and our students are very talented in it, and I think that those have been really successful in a lot of ways. But I honestly think the big piece has a lot to do with exactly what my colleague Gil was just saying. Our students are engaged with artists all the time and are engaged with Society of Alums at Denison. So I'm sometimes blown away by our very busy and famous and terribly important alums who are more than happy to take a meeting with a student who says, look, I'm going to move to the city where you work, and I wonder if you would give me advice. Or, I mean, that's really common, strikingly common. And I send so many brief thank you emails to people just for being lovely members of the Society of Alums. And then we're fortunate across the college. We're fortunate in theater. Lots and lots of our alums are people in a position to have authority, means of mentorship, possibility for employment. I mean, a lot of our alums have done really interesting things in the theater and in film and television and the arts. And they tend to be really wonderful mentors to our students when they leave Granville.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Before we turn it over to question and answer, my last question for all of you is if you could share one piece of advice with a student looking to go into the performing arts at Denison, what would it be? All of you look up.
We do.
Vince.
Well, something crosses my mind, which is that there's a line that we use at Denison that I don't really agree with. I think it needs to be framed in a slightly different way. And that is, one needs to be willing to fail, right? You need to be willing. And I don't feel like that's what we're doing in the arts. I think when you try something that doesn't work, that's practice. You're practicing. You're trying things out. You're being creative. You're keeping an open mind. So this concept that you need to be willing to try things and then try something else and then try something else, that sense of that work ethic of putting in lots of hours, going with the flow, understanding what's going on, trying it, seeing if it works, being willing to critique your work, finding colleagues, both peers, other students, and also faculty, and also these professional people that we're talking about that come to campus, being willing to share your work with those people and take that critical feedback and decide what you think about that and work with that. So I think that my piece of advice about working in the arts, both at Denison and perhaps more importantly in the world beyond Denison, is that you need to just like keep working it, just keep doing it, you know, just sit up, keep trying and see what happens. And also be willing to say, okay, I really want to look at what's going on here. And I really want to decide which of these aspects are working and which of these aspects I need to try something else for. Yeah.
That's really good, Gil. I said before, I think you have to be curious all the time, and I think you have to chase that curiosity all the time, and then you have to work really hard. So that thing people say about how it's not what you know, it's who you know, something like that. I think there's wisdom in that. I just think we read it wrong, which is to say, oh, I realize I just framed this the exact same way you framed your advice, Gil. I apologize for my inadvertent.
Live in a small way. That must be it.
But like it is who you know. But what that means isn't like, do you have like an aunt who's the president of a film studio? No. That's not what it means. It means every opportunity you get, you work hard. You are a teammate. You are engaged with people. You are kind. You get there early and you stay a little late. Don't stay too late. It's you need to take care of yourself. But I mean, like, but to be that person who is open to new experiences and who is curious and then who works hard and who is kind and who is decent to your collaborators. The work that all three of us do in our art forms are so deeply connected to sharing and collaborating, being a good collaborator, and then you know people, and then those people really want to work with you again. And that's a huge amount of one's career as an artist is developing these growing and growing networks of people who are just like, oh my gosh, that person is so talented, and they're also just a delight. Of course, I want them, on board. I just think that's invaluable. I think when I figured that out as a young person, it made all the difference in the world to me.
Yeah, I think that idea of networking is something that we don't think about, and we're not taught. And I'm not trying to say that like you need to be slimy and network, but I think what Mark is saying is very, very true. The classmates that you will have in college will be your colleagues for life. So the spark that you generate with them and the projects that you do and the things that you sort of work on together, you will remember their strengths and they will remember yours too. So I agree with Mark, and I know there's that quote about like what for theater or for acting, that there's no such thing as a small role. I think that's true in whatever you're doing. And so if you're pursuing whatever may, but we are talking about sort of the performing arts, is whether you're in the very back of a section or something, or if you're leading it, you play a very important role, and you need to believe in that role, and you need to work on that role. I think the idea, in terms of advice for someone coming to Denison, I would say two things. One is allow yourself to dream. Denison is an institution where you will get to do what you want to do. And if you have a creative idea of something to build or to develop, you can find the ways to do that. Denison will find ways to support you to do that. The second piece of advice is to be self-critical. Keep your ears open. It's so easy for us to criticize one another. You can hear someone else perform or do something and you just say, oh, she or he did this wrong, da 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 da. But to turn that mirror on yourself, to be like, okay, what do I need to work on? That's something that the sooner we all develop that as artists, the quicker we start to grow. And all of us, all of the faculty here are here to support you and help you develop those. So the more you are self-aware about what you need to work on, what you want to work on, the more we will also be able to support that as well.
Those were all wonderful pieces of advice I wish I had going into college. So I do appreciate that. If you do have questions, please feel free to add them to the question and answer box at the bottom of your page. First, we'll start, this one is directed at Mark. Mark, how do you support your students that specialize in technical theater during this time?
During this
I think this year, COVID.
We thought about that. Well, Ching-Chu offered an extraordinarily eloquent and serious response in talking about the remarkably large number of things that we think about all the time. The safety of our students and of this community is critical and paramount. And I'm so proud to be part of a group of people who have taken this so very seriously. We thought about the students doing technical work was one of the first sets of conversations. So we started to think about like how fittings were going to work in the costume process, what would happen in the context of performance and production. So that first piece we did, for instance, one of the first things the director considered had to do a little bit with what Ching-Chu was talking about with when we think about people who are projecting their voice. So she immediately determined that we would work entirely with recorded sound that was operating in a kind of an interesting mixture with the physicality, and that was in part like a broader concern about a group of actors who would always be, actually in almost every case, in far more than 6 feet apart and always masked, and at an audience in the same way exactly, but still, like, how do we make, because an assistant stage manager, or there's a lot of work that happens that's really up close. We thought about that a lot. What's happened really is we tried to make sure, I think we have made sure, that at every stage of what we think of in terms of production, we're thinking through those questions and those problems. None of them were insurmountable. In some cases, we simply changed the practice. And so this is like a very small example, and it perhaps doesn't get to your point, but normally in a production we have dressers, a technical theater maker whose job is sort of dealing technically with the costume matter that an actor is putting on and taking off. We didn't work with dressers in this context. We instead said to actors, you have more responsibilities here than you normally would. Moreover, we chose to perform on a calendar that would make the washing and drying cycle of costumes something that would happen at the end of the run instead of multiple times throughout the run. That's like a small thing, but we had to really think through the planning for that. To sort of work through the way that people's bodies were engaged in space. In sort of broader terms, if you go into the studios where we teach our acting classes, there are boxes taped out on the floor, and we're being thoughtful about the space and scale. There's a lot of volume in those spaces as well. But yeah, it's been that part of it. It's a really great question, by the way, because I think it's an invisible part to a lot of our sort of up the hill colleagues. If you come to Denison, you will find that we refer to the college as up the hill and down the hill. And when I say down the hill, I mean the arts, and it's literally just geography. I think that some of that was a little bit invisible. So we just tried to be as thoughtful as we possibly could about it. Certainly, there wasn't a situation where like one group of students had sort of one set of ways of remaining safe, and then some others just did their best, right? We really had to think through a procedure for every single person who was involved every single night, no matter what. And I'm extraordinarily proud of what they've accomplished so far.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Gil and Mark, whoever wants to take this. We have a student who is a singer and an actor, but they don't have any dance experience. Are there any beginner dance classes to help with the productions? And then how many shows include kind of that dance and music type of routine, I guess, or production?
So we certainly have beginner dance classes. I can tell you that our department is equally divided between Afrocentric derived movement and Eurocentric derived movement. In fact, we're the only liberal arts college in the United States that is like that. And so we have beginning level classes in both of those kinds of forms. So house, hip hop, you know, various kinds of culturally derived movement, what we call generally contemporary dance. I apologize for the term because if you're doing it right now, it's contemporary, but regardless of that, contemporary dance. But I think the question might be getting at whether or not we have a beginning level course in what I would call a kind of a theatrical dance form. And the answer to that is that we don't have an ongoing beginning level class in that. We do actually, interesting that you're asking Mark, because we do actually have Belinda in music who works with that kind of movement precisely. So, I mean, here's a great example of the three departments being disciplinarily titled in a certain kind of way, but the actual instrument of being an artist, I don't want to say falls between, I would say belongs to all of us, you know, in a certain kind of way. Yeah, so it's one of the advantages of putting us in Eisner and putting us together, because the space is available, the faculty is available, and the students' interest when it's called for in the theatrical production, whether that's hosted by the theater department or hosted by the music department, doesn't really matter. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, that's exactly, Gil couldn't be more right. It's, if you're talking about a particular kind of movement that we associate with like the way musical theater tends to operate, that lives more in the Department of Music than it does in either dance or theater. We're really, I mean, one of the ways that I'm proud of the way we do theater making is that we in a faculty of 6, I have 2 colleagues who are experts in abstract physical theater making, and I think that that's a really robust and a serious set of ways of engaging physically. So like that's, you know, part of my answer to the question. I love the work that happens across the performing arts at the college. Although, yeah, in that territory, I think some of the most wonderful work happens in the Department of Music, not in that particular, you know, mode of performance rather than theater or dance.
I see that David sort of had a follow-up to that question. So I guess just to make sure that we're answering what he may have asking, the theater department, Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong, typically puts on 4 shows a year. And in terms of your question previously about musicals, we put on 1 to 2 a semester, depending. If it's 2 a semester, then in our department, we put on a musical and then we put on some sort of review. Otherwise, we'd be putting on sort of a bigger musical at the end of the semester. And now that we're all in the same space, last year was the first time that theater and music sort of came together and did production. And it's something that I hope that we can do sort of, you know, on a regular basis. So hopefully that helps, David, in your question.
And I didn't, David, see your question, but the only thing I would add to that, and I often do because students ask about musical theater rather frequently, is I'll say that one thing that I love about that, first of all, I think that sort of co-production that we did it's really this calendar year, right? It was in February.
Yeah.
Was, I think, extraordinarily successful, and I want to see that continue. We do 4 major works each year. About every other year, one of them is a musical. What I love is that the work that the Department of Music does tends to rehearse 2 to 3 times a week in the late afternoon. Whereas when we rehearse 4 hours a night for 5 weeks. As a consequence, the same students will do the work that's happening in the Department of Music and the work that's happening in the Department of Theater. They need a dinner break in between, and sometimes it's a little hectic, but it's also remarkably common for students to engage in both of those things at once. They are not in competition, which I think is, sometimes I think Denison students get overextended, but I think that's a pretty wonderful opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had a couple questions regarding majors versus non-majors. Are there opportunities in all of your departments for non-majors to participate? What does that look like? Are there specific areas reserved just for majors?
No.
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 So non-majors can participate. They're happy to do so. Just audition processes and things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this work is open to Denison students who are passionate about making the art. We're deeply devoted to it's like serious work, but it's serious work for chemistry majors, just like it's serious work for dance majors and music majors and theater majors.
Very good. Just make sure. Okay, great. I just want to make sure I'm getting through all of these.
Sure. There's one on here, Ali, if I can jump in. Like, it's
Absolutely.
interesting. Mateus had asked, like, do you think elements that have come to us will stay after the virus? I think that's a very interesting question. I think there's so many different things that we're doing now that I'm curious to see what will remain afterwards. Obviously, these Zoom and the technology aspects are sort of new for many of us to sort of try to use in a day-to-day basis, but now they're becoming regular, right? We have, even if you're 4 or 5 years old and you're in preschool, you might be doing a remote thing. So like, I think in terms of how this is going to go on, it'll be really interesting to see what you guys will bring to it when you come and use it creatively. One thing that we're doing as we're in the middle of reviewing our department, just like Mark has just finished with the theater department. And one of the things we've talked about is we offer sound recording and engineering as a course. And it's been an elective that gets filled really quickly. Students from across the campus love to take it. And we're sort of thinking, you know what? This is probably something that we should offer every single one of our majors and minors. This should be something that you do so that you can go out and you have some proficiency in microphone placement and producing your own sound so that you can go out and perform. So I think that's one thing that this virus sort of has also brought, is just sort of the awareness of technology, the aware of being self-sufficient and how to be creative in your art making.
And then we have one, Mark, specifically for you. What is the new version of the theater major that you referred to earlier?
Oh, sure. Here's my really short version. So it is in lots of terms, structurally exactly what presently appears on the website. The significant differences are that in the old major, we asked that students take a series of elective courses, but we didn't determine it. They were just so take this many courses. Now, what we ask students to do is to develop an emphasis. That emphasis is self-designed, so it could be traditional. You could be an actor or a playwright. It could be traditional but more specific. You could be a costume designer, or it could be entirely of your own making and thematic. And an example of this is you could take an extra one of my history and theory courses in my colleague Cheryl's theater and social justice class, and if you've taken the prerequisites, maybe the economic justice course up in the Department of Economics, and you could tie that together and make your emphasis theater and social justice. So the fact that we've taken that elective suite and focused it is a big piece. And then another third of our major had previously been a series of kind of introductory courses in those subdisciplines, acting, directing, etc. And instead now we have a robust core of theater making courses, the first of which is entirely about collaboration and the visual work of actors and designers. The second is mostly about the work that directors and actors do. And the third is either a course that has to do with text and playwrights and directors, or a course that's devoted to devising an ensemble. But all of them are connected broadly to this idea about theater making at its core. And then the other big piece is we used to have a lot of our majors do a senior project, whether a creative one or a research one. That's now a requirement. All of our students will do a significant 1 or 2 semester senior project.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have time for one last question. There were a few regarding auditions this year. We are very excited to announce that Denison will be offering scholarships for students who submit portfolio, materials, videos. There are supplemental information on the website that you can find in terms of auditions. You can chat with some of our lovely faculty members. Those will be happening November 9th. So definitely check out our website, check your email to sign up for those opportunities. In terms of auditions in general, for our dance and theater department, there are no particular auditions when you're coming to Denison, but we are offering chats with faculty members, with students, to learn a little bit more about the departments, for them to get to know you a little bit better. Music is a little bit different. I'm going to have Chinchuk really touch on that and what those qualifications are. But once you're on campus for other departments, there may be audition processes in terms of joining a theater production or things of that nature, but there aren't any other auditions up front, but I want Chinchu to really qualify that for the music piece.
Sure. So for music, there's a variety of ways to do it. And Ali talked about the November 9th audition. So if you go to our webpage, you can sort of find out audition requirements. Basically, if you're an instrumentalist or a vocalist, you'll perform 2 different pieces or excerpts of pieces that you have ready. And we're trying to do it live so that you can sort of be in the comfort of your own home, but sort of zoom on in and audition for us. And then we will also have various sessions so you can talk to students and meet students, and you can ask all the questions of various teachers that you might be studying with. The second option is what Ali has also said, is as part of the admission process. If you want to submit a portfolio, you can do that and we will evaluate it that way. If there's a chance to do the one on November 9th or the one in January, I think it will be on MLK Day, that'd be great, because then we can meet with you, we can talk with you live, we can answer all your questions there. But you will find all the sort of specifications for instruments or vocal range and that kind of stuff on those pages. And then shoot me an email. I have the shortest email at Denison. It's my last name, which is 2 letters, hu@denison.edu, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. If we did not get to your question, like I said before, I will send them to the faculty members and they will answer them for you in the next couple of days or so. But we really appreciate your time this evening. Again, we know there's a lot going on in your lives and you decided to join us. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate Gil, Mark, and Chinchu. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We know this year looks incredibly different from years prior. So whatever you need from Denison, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I can find the best resource for you on our campus, and then they can answer your questions from there. But thank you all so much for your time, and hopefully we'll be seeing you on campus for a visit soon. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.